This lesson will show you how to determine the cost of inventory under the perpetual inventory system using the weighted average cost method. Under the weighted average inventory costing method, the cost of the units sold in ending inventory is a weighted average of the purchase costs. When weighted average is used in a perpetual inventory system, a weighted average unit cost for each item is computed every time a purchase is made. Once the weighted average unit cost is calculated, this unit cost is used to calculate the cost of the units sold to customers. However, once new units are purchased again, the weighted average has to be recalculated. This technique is called a moving average. Let's walk through an example. Using the inventory information that's provided in the chart for item 127B, we will review the process of recording each transaction based on the weighted average costing method. As previously discussed, the basic format of the inventory record report does not change depending on the costing method. Therefore, the same report format is used for FIFO, LIFO, and weighted average. The report has 10 columns. The first column is used to record the date of each transaction. Columns 2, 3, and 4 are used to record the quantity, unit cost, and total cost of the purchases. Columns 5, 6, and 7 are used to record the quantity, unit cost, and total cost of the cost of merchandise sold. The last 3 columns are used to calculate the quantity, unit cost, and total cost of the units that remain in inventory. Now we'll walk through entering the transactions from the inventory chart into the inventory record report using weighted average. On January 1st, there is an opening inventory balance of 1,000 units with a $20 per unit cost. Just like LIFO and FIFO, the opening balance is entered in the last 3 columns. The date January 1st is entered in the first row of the date column. In the last 3 columns titled Inventory, enter $1,000 in the quantity column and $20 in the unit cost column. Calculate the total cost of the opening inventory by multiplying 1,000 by $20, which is $20,000. Next, enter the total cost of $20,000 in the last column. On January 4th, the company sold 700 units at a selling price of $30 per unit. Whenever the company sells inventory, the transaction is tracked in the cost of merchandise sold columns. The first step is to enter the transaction date of January 4th in the date column. The only inventory the company has available to fill this order is the opening inventory of 1,000 units. Therefore, the second step is to enter 700 in the quantity column and $20 in the unit cost column of the cost of goods sold section. Similar to LIFO and FIFO, the unit cost of $20 that we've entered for the 700 units that were sold is the same unit cost for the 1,000 units that the company has in inventory. As previously discussed, do not use the unit selling price of $30 as the unit cost. The selling price represents revenue, not cost. The third step is to calculate the total cost of the 700 units sold. This is done by multiplying 700 by $20, which equals $14,000. Next, enter the $14,000 in the total cost column in the cost of merchandise sold section. The last step is to determine how much inventory is left after the 700 units are sold and enter the balance in the last 3 columns of the report, which is the inventory section. To calculate the number of units remaining, simply subtract 700 from 1,000, which is 300 units. Enter 300 in the quantity column and $20 in the unit cost column of the inventory section. The last step is to calculate the total cost of the remaining units by multiplying 300 by $20, then enter the amount in the total cost column of the inventory section. If you've calculated this correctly, the total cost of the remaining 300 units in inventory should be $6,000. On January 10th, the company purchased 500 units at a cost of $22.40 per unit. Just like in previous examples, when the company purchases more units, the transactions are recorded on the 3 columns of the purchases section of the report. As always, the first step is to enter the date of the transaction, which is January 10th, in the date column. The second step is to enter $500 in the quantity column and $22.40 in the unit cost column of the purchases section. The next step is to calculate the total cost of the units sold by multiplying $500 by $22.40, which is $11,200. Enter this amount in the total cost column of the purchases section. The final step is to update the last three columns of the inventory report to reflect the new inventory balances. And this is where you will see a significant difference between weighted average cost method and the other two methods. With the weighted cost method, whenever a company purchases more units to place in inventory for future sale, you have to recalculate the weighted average unit cost for the units that are in inventory. Let's walk through the process of calculating the weighted average unit cost for this company. After the January 4th transaction is recorded, the company has 300 units at a cost of $20 per unit left in inventory. On January 10th, they purchased 500 units at a cost of $22.40 per unit. The formula to calculate the weighted average unit cost is to take the total number of units and divide it by total cost. With the company in our example, we need to first determine the total number of units in inventory. This is done by adding the remaining 300 units and the 500 units just purchased together, which equals 800 units. The next step is to calculate the total cost of the 800 units that remain in inventory. This is done by taking the total cost of the 300 units, which is $6,000, and the total cost of the 500 units, which is $11,200, and then adding them together. If this is calculated correctly, total cost should be $17,200. The final step required to calculate the weighted average unit cost is to divide the total cost of $17,200 by the total units, which is 800, and the unit cost should be $21.50 per unit. Now that we've calculated the weighted average unit cost, we need to finish entering the January 10th transaction by completing the last three columns of the report, which is the inventory section. With FIFO and LIFO, if a company has two or more different groups of inventory that were purchased on different days and at different amounts, you are required to list the remaining balance of each group separately in the inventory section of the report. With weighted average, you actually add the different groups of inventory together and use the weighted average unit cost to calculate the total cost of the remaining units in inventory. When completing the inventory report record for January 10th, enter 800 in the quantity column and $21.50 in the unit cost column of the inventory section. The unit cost of $21.50 is the weighted average unit cost we previously calculated. The final step is to determine the total cost of the 800 units that remain in inventory by simply multiplying 800 by $21.50, which is $17,200. Then enter the total cost in the last column of the report. Let's quickly review one more transaction. On January 22nd, the company sold 360 units at a selling price of $30 per unit. As always, the first step is to enter January 22nd in the date column. The second step is to enter the number of units sold, which is 360 units, in the quantity column of the cost of goods sold section of the report. The third step is to enter the unit cost of the units that were sold based on the unit cost of the units in inventory. With LIFO and FIFO, you would need to know the order in which the units that remain in inventory were purchased and the unit cost paid when each group was purchased. With weighted average, you do not need to know this because the units are pooled together and the unit cost will be the weighted average unit cost for all units that remain in inventory. Therefore, in our example, the unit cost of the 360 units is $21.50. The next step is to calculate total cost of the units sold by multiplying 360 by $21.50, which is $17,200, and enter this amount in the total cost column of the cost of goods sold section. The last and final step is to complete the inventory columns to reflect the new inventory balance that remains after the order of 360 is filled. The units remaining is 440, which is calculated by subtracting 360 from 800. Enter 440 in the quantity column and $21.50 in the unit cost column of the inventory section. The last step is to enter the total cost of $9,460 in the last column. Total cost is calculated by multiplying the remaining units of 440 by the weighted average unit cost of $21.50. Please walk through the rest of the transactions in this problem on page 279 in the book to ensure you fully understand the process of completing the inventory report using the weighted average method. Do not forget that you have to recalculate the unit cost every time the company buys more inventory.